that party, the Republican Party.
Right.
And you can see that with Grebe's control of the party, it went to hell in a bucket is the only way you could describe it.
Yeah.
He is the cause of all that. And when Grebe knew that he and his firm were under investigation and that we had busted them, you can imagine that he called every dirty guy on the Republican National Committee's former list of Nixon cronies, and all of a sudden our country became infected with people like, Rumsfeld and, outright losers from the past, to be quite frank. Cheney was probably the biggest losing politician ever, meaning everything he touched went awry. And so all of a sudden, Grebe, to seize control, and this is where he knew he would lose $1 billion, his fortune. They were busted. They were under investigation. Their name was, the Foley and Larnder name was on a patent in Brian Utley's name for one of my inventions without any other inventors. I mean, they were dead. They were caught. The evidence was out. I circulated it.
So what did they do to protect themselves?
Well, I say that Grebe, who's a former West Point cadet, threw a coup on the United States and through election manipulation and fraud, pulled a coup on the country. He rigged elections. He was already in the process, I believe, through the Federalist Society, which is the group of guys trying to destroy the federal court system, and are close to doing it, by the way. And so he was a big, guy in this cabal already of corrupt attorneys. So here was the chance and the need to overthrow the country. Well, look what they did. They got in. They, if I'm correct, they threw the presidential election with Judge Jorge Labarga, who got elected to the Supreme Court, funny enough, while he's in a lawsuit with me. I wonder if he disclosed that when he was going for a Supreme Court nomination, that he was in a $12 trillion lawsuit federally. And I wonder if, the great, people of Florida know all about this history, and he's, I'm sure reported it to, all liability carriers, et cetera. But what Labarga did was he threw the election. He usurped the people's recount and threw it up to the Supreme Court goons who were already in place blocking me. So there were already a bunch of bad guys there.
This is in Florida now you're talking about.
Yeah, this is the Florida Bush v. Gore election.
Yeah, and so...
It orchestrated by lawyers like Proskauer and Foley, who knew that they were about to go to prison for the next 30 years if they were busted fraudulently filing patents,
So do you think, let me ask you a question, do you think if Gore was elected it would have changed things?
No, because they were going to get to whoever it was. And Proskauer has the Democratic influence, whereas Foley had the Republican influence, so they would have got to him either way.
It's really what we're talking about here is the influence of lawyers and law firms on this country.
Oh, the takeover of this country.
Yeah, and that, I mean, I don't want to politicize it. What I want to do is I want to uncover the fact that there are, that there's organized lawyers. It's
on both sides, Republican and Democratic.
Exactly, and they'll do whatever they have to do to protect themselves, whether they're Democrats or Republicans. They're protecting themselves as lawyers, and they're invested in all of the other branches of government, so there's no recourse against them because there's no separation of powers. My guest this afternoon is Eliot Bernstein, and we are discussing a really interesting case, a huge case in the terms of litigation today in the United States. It's probably the largest case right now that has been brought in the courts from a standpoint of damages at $12 trillion. There's nothing that I've ever heard that's larger than that. And the main proponent of that, the main individual is Eliot Bernstein, whose inventions were stolen from him by attorneys and by a series of protectionist and organized arrangements against him. We'll be right back with Eliot Bernstein. Don't go away. This is Disbar, the Florida Bar. I'm your host, Les Winston. I'm with you every day from 2 to 3 p.m. right here on The Biz, the fastest growing radio station in South Florida. And we are discussing with victims of the Florida Bar's corruption. We are talking about this so that the folks get a handle on what it is that's going on. This is not just local issue. It's not an issue here in South Florida. It's an issue around all of Florida. It's an issue around a lot of the United States. It's very important that we understand that we have lost a tremendous, control in our system of checks and balances by virtue of the lawyers being involved in all of the branches of government. And, it's not the good lawyers we're talking about. It's the ones that are corrupted, the ones that are part of the good old boys club who are basically running the country. We'll be right back with Eliot Bernstein. Don't go away. My name is Les Winston, and I host Disbar, the Florida Bar, right here on The Biz in South Florida.
The United States Trustees Program is the largest organized criminal element in the world.
In Florida, all other professionals except lawyers are governed by the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. Only lawyers regulate themselves through the Florida Bar.
Because the Florida Bar is controlling all three branches of government now. We have attorneys in all three branches. There's a system out of control. There's no more check and balance.
This has created a very dangerous good old boys club and a lot of rotten apples.
Sue me.
Tune in each weekday from 2 o'clock to 3 p.m. and listen to stories of individuals who have been affected by the corruption of the Florida Bar. We want you to be aware of the problem that we have with this disciplinary agency. Join us every weekday, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. right here on The Biz. And we're back. This is Disbar, the Florida Bar. I'm your host, Les Winston. My guest this afternoon is Eliot Bernstein. Eliot, before we took our break, we were talking about the fact that that we've lost control of the country in a sense to the attorneys, and when there's money at stake, big money at stake, they will do anything and everything they have to do to protect themselves, especially when they get caught, and that's what we were talking about before. But now I want to go back and I want to focus a little bit more on the Florida Bar's role in this, because though compared to the New York Bar and compared to what has been uncovered by this lady, the whistleblower Anderson, who was working in the New York system of discipline, who blew the whistle on this on another party that was actually the sanitizer or the cleaner for complaints against those in favor. We now talk about the Florida Bar and the Florida Bar's corruption here in Florida, in the sense that they do the same thing, that the Florida Bar has a systematic way of dealing with complaints against attorneys who are in favor, and they basically prevent any harm from coming to those individuals. And I want to relate your experience. What did you do with the Florida Bar about your situation?
Well, it's interesting that you say that they act like the New York Bar, because in my case, they actually acted together.
In conjunction with the New York Bar.
And it's a fascinating story.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, Grebe from Foley and Proskauer now have evidence all over the place that they committed this crime.
And the evidence is clear. There's no question in your mind that if you presented your evidence to a jury of 12 uninterested individuals, they would come back and they would say, there's no question of a doubt that this is what happened.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I presented it to federal investigators like the Federal Patent Bar, which oversights federal patent attorneys.
Right.
And they're investigating.
Okay.
And I've presented it to the FBI. They've seemed to lost my file after the investigator said he was going to the patent office to work with Mr. Motes, who's the director of the patent office, OED.
Which FBI office is that?
That would be the West Palm Beach under Stephen Lou Casey was the special agent in charge.
Okay.
He's gone missing. They actually asked me if I knew where he was, which I did.
Okay.
Because he had said he was leaving to work with Motes regarding the attorney crimes that were frauds upon the United States, not just fraud against Eliot. These guys had submitted false oaths of application as registered federal patent agents, and these are serious Title 18 crimes, very serious. So,
well, what you said before, I just want to reiterate what you said before, which is really important, that the most valuable thing that we have in this country are our patents.
Oh, absolutely. They're bigger. You can have an invention that's worth a fortune, and if your patent attorney's got the ability to steal it from you, there's a few things that'll happen. Inventors will stop inventing.
Right.
Because the king owns your invention, and normally when the king wants to claim your invention, he cuts your head off and claims it as his own.
Right.
so nobody wants to be the next great inventor.
Right. So so where we have the system of exploiting or using the entrepreneurial skills and the inventive minds of Americans, what's going on behind the scenes are the contraction and dismantling of our abilities to protect ourselves in the patents of our inventors.
Correct. And
Okay.
and where the attorneys are the ones stealing the inventions, the only thing an attorney has ever invented is a way to steal a patent.
Okay.
They're not a normally very inventive club.
Mm-hmm.
So this is about...
Well, they're inventive with regard to protecting themselves and working around the chessboard where their king
how
is
to
going to be
steal a
attacked.
patent.
Yeah, exactly.
So you got to cover your butt.
Your assets. Yeah.
When you get caught, so you got to have people inside the patent office. You got to have a whole thing. I think these law firms have been running way back schemes of taking, estates, and the more and more they got away with these schemes, the riskier they became.
Mm-hmm.
The more they got, they realized their power if they misused it.
Right.
The more criminal organizations realized that if they could control law firms, they control the country.
Right.
And so how did Florida and New York work together is an interesting story.
Okay.
After the election fraud that Labarga and West Palm helped orchestrate, I ended up in court with Jorge Labarga.
Okay.
And strangely enough, Warner Brothers discovered during their due diligence to do we were already licensed. I was working inside their advanced technology labs. My office was in their building in California. I had an office here in Boca. And they came back and said, oh my God, the patents that Brian Utley showed us aren't the patents that are on file with the U.S. Patent Office. You need to check that out. And you're in a lawsuit with your lawyers in a bankruptcy with Brian Utley et al. And I said, what? Nobody's in a bankruptcy. Nobody's in a lawsuit with it. Look, here's a brand new Wachovia private placement Proskauer put together. They don't say anything about suits and bankruptcies and
right.
What do you? So I called a friend of mine who is a lawyer, and she looked it up, and lo and behold, Iviewit was actually being sued by Proskauer, and they were in a bankruptcy with Utley and some other IBM people, and they're people from Real 3D.
Mm-hmm.
And this is part of the scam that we learned about when Motes from the Patent Office said that all of Foley and Larnder's assignments were wrong. Well, what it appears has happened, if you notice from my emails to you, I have like 20 companies, some identically named, where part of the scam that they ran on Friedkin was Wheeler was brought in by Utley, who was running Friedkin's company, to patent the Friedkin inventions at Diamond Turf into companies owned by Utley. And at his home address. And Dick was writing the patents and filing them on behalf of Utley and his company. And so this is the kind of scam where they set up these companies that look and smell like yours.
Right.
And they put in the real patents into those companies, saving the filing dates for themselves and everything, because you need that.
Right.
And then I believe basically that the scheme they were planning was they had moved technologies into these dummy corporations they had set up. I was in a lawsuit with Proskauer where we had Counsel, the company, and we didn't even know about the Counsel, and we never retained them, and it was bizarre. It was like surreal at the time.
I mean, it was litigation that you didn't know about.
Right, that wasn't disclosed in a Wachovia private placement, a bankruptcy, assets transferring in the background, perhaps
so now
the technologies that were transferring to Enron.
Yeah, so Warner Brother brings this to your attention. You investigate and you find out that this is going on.
I go into a courtroom. First of all, we fire everybody.
Fire? What do you mean everybody?
We fire everybody. We fire Utley. We fire the whole company goes down, and we shut down Boca overnight. The minute we catch on to some of this in 2001, and we get rid of them all.
Okay.
And we go to look at what these cases are. So
when you say we, who's the we?
We just the investors and interested parties and people who are
the people who are in your organized entity.
Right. I had like several hundred NDAs with
Right.
Fortune 500 companies.
Right.
I was already in license contracts with several Fortune 500 companies.